compliments became constant. And these weren't ordinary compliments, they were disproportionate, over the top. The kind of compliments where you're just there thinking, okay, calm down, please, just calm down. You don't even know me that well. I knew I was being gassed up, like gassed up. I could feel it. But again, I said nothing. I observed. Initially, I enjoyed speaking with him. But very early on, I noticed something. No matter where our conversations began, they had an extraordinary tendency to end up in the same place. Schmecks. We were grown people. I wasn't scandalized by the existence of schmecks. This wasn't the issue. It was the philosophy underneath the way he talked about it that began making me uncomfortable, because he didn't seem to speak about schmecks simply as intimacy between two people who loved each other. The way he spoke about it increasingly sounded to me like leverage, like power, like something a person could become so good at providing that another human being would find it difficult to leave them. In my mind, surely there has to be a point where whatever happens in the bedroom becomes irrelevant. If somebody is hurt, you leave. That's common sense. But he disagreed. He told me there are women in terrible relationships who remain because of what the man gives them sexually. And that troubled me. It troubled me deeply. According to him, even his former wife still wanted sexual access to him. So I said very little. I listened. And this is where something I said in the previous video becomes important. Restraint is not compliance. Okay, let's finally begin. If you've watched the prologue and the video I made before this, you already know where this story eventually goes, but I don't want to start at the end. I want to take you back to the beginning, back to when there was no grand revelation, no dramatic incident, no obvious catastrophe, just a man, a conversation, and eventually a feeling I couldn't explain. And there is something I need you to know about this man before I continue. I'm deliberately not going to tell you what country he's from, and throughout the story, I'm also going to avoid identifying the country where I live. Those details are not necessary. But there is one detail that is necessary. This man was already resident in what people will describe as a developed first world country. And I was also living in a developed first world country. I am telling you that because as the story unfolds, I don't want anybody reducing what happened to the stereotype that this kind of dynamics only involved desperate men from poorer countries trying to gain access to women living in wealthier countries. No, that wasn't the situation. He was an accomplished man, educated, well-spoken, established in his own right, significantly older than I was. He had come to the country where I lived to study and obtain further qualifications. And that was when I met him. It was an ordinary day, an ordinary public setting, nothing dramatic, nothing that announced, pay attention, this person is going to become a subject of an entire book one day. I simply met a man, and he was very charming, warm, jovial, well-spoken and interesting to talk to. He knew how to carry a conversation. He spoke the language of faith, family, commitment, love, marriage, the future. And at that point in my life, I wasn't looking for someone to complete me. That's important. I had recently come out of a bad marriage. I was rebuilding. I was working. I was healing. I was raising my children. And I was writing my first book. That book would become Redefine Your Narrative, Rediscover Your Identity and Working Purpose. And the irony of what I was writing at the time is not lost on me now, because I was writing about hidden psychological warfare, spiritual abuse, identity, the things women sometimes experience but struggle to find language for. My head was full. I had lived through things. I had questions. I had observations. I had thoughts I needed to put somewhere. I was trying to create language for experiences that can be incredibly difficult to name while you are inside them. So when this man met me, he didn't meet an empty woman sitting around waiting for somebody to give her a life. I already had a life. I was rebuilding one. I wasn't close to love. I wasn't close to friendship. I wasn't saying nobody can ever come near me again. No. If something genuine came along, I was open to seeing where it went, but I wasn't vacant. My heart had borders now, and that distinction matters. So we began talking, and initially I enjoyed speaking with him, but very early on I noticed something. No matter where our conversations began, they had an extraordinary tendency to end up in the same place. Schmecks, again and again and again. And I needed to understand what bothered me about this. It wasn't simply that two divorced adults were having adult conversations. We had both been married before, right? We were grown people. I wasn't scandalized by the existence of schmecks. This wasn't the issue. it was the philosophy underneath the way he talked about it that began making me uncomfortable, because he didn't seem to speak about schmeck simply as intimacy between two people who loved each other. The way he spoke about it increasingly sounded to me like leverage, like power, like something a person could become so good at providing that another human being would find it difficult to leave them. And one particular thing he repeatedly said stayed with me. He would say that if a man truly knows how to please a woman schmecksually, that woman will find it very difficult to leave him, even when other things in the relationship aren't right. And I remember challenging the idea once. I asked him something along the lines of, what if the man is abusive? Because in my mind, surely there has to be a point where whatever happens in the bedroom becomes irrelevant. If somebody is hurt, you leave. That's common sense. But he disagreed. He told me there are women in terrible relationships who remain because of what the man gives them sexually. And that troubled me. It troubled me deeply, because I wasn't hearing schmecks can strengthen intimacy between two people. I was hearing something different. What I was hearing was, if you can satisfy somebody strongly enough, you can make leaving you difficult even when the relationship itself is bad. And I remember thinking, why does your mind work like this? I didn't say that to him. Remember, I told you before the series began, I listened, I observed. I didn't interrupt every uncomfortable statement with an argument. I didn't accuse him of anything. No, I didn't judge him. I didn't say, this is a red flag. I simply took note, because at that stage, I was still getting to know him, and people are different. People express themselves differently. I thought maybe this was simply his way of speaking. Maybe I was misunderstanding him. Maybe because we were both adults who had previously been married, he felt comfortable speaking openly. So I gave the conversation room. But it kept happening. Schmecks, schmecks, schmecks. Eventually, I became so uncomfortable with the pattern that I mentioned it to somebody at work. I remember telling my colleague, there is this man I'm talking to. He doesn't live here at the moment, but every time we speak, somehow the conversation comes back to schmecks. And then I said something I remember very clearly. I remember saying, I don't think this man has anything to offer me. That was genuinely how I felt, because I wasn't leaving our conversations emotionally stimulated. I wasn't thinking, wow, that was an interesting perspective. I wasn't discovering layers of emotional depth. Eventually, I started feeling as though everything descended into carnality, the flesh, make sure performance, what he could do, how desirable he was, how difficult he was to forget. And then he began telling me stories about women from his past. According to him, even his former wife still wanted sexual access to him. He told me that she would contact him wanting to be intimate with him, but that he refused. And there was another former partner. This was somebody he had been in a serious relationship with after his divorce. They had lived together. They had bought a house together. They had apparently been moving toward marriage. But according to him, the relationship ended after he discovered she had been unfaithful. And then he told me something else. According to him, this woman later traveled from the country where they had lived to the country where I was living, the same country where he had come to study. And he told me that she gave him a substantial amount of money and was essentially pleading for another intimate encounter with him. He said he refused. Again, I listened. I wasn't there. I couldn't independently verify those stories. So I wasn't going to treat everything somebody told me about their previous relationships as established fact. But I was paying attention to why he was telling me these stories, because there seemed to be a recurring message underneath them. Women couldn't let go of him. Women came back. Women pursued him. Women would cross borders. Women would spend money. Women would tolerate things. And the implied explanation always seemed to come back to his sexual ability. And I remember thinking, what exactly are you trying to communicate to me? Are you telling me about your past? Or are you advertising something? Are you sharing experiences? Or are you establishing an expectation? Are you telling me who these women were? Or are you telling me what you expect me to eventually become? I didn't know. So I said very little. I listened. And this is where something I said in the previous video becomes important. Restraint is not compliance. Because I think sometimes people expect discernment to look dramatic. They think the moment you notice something strange, you have to stand up, point your finger and announce, red flag. That's not always how I operate. Sometimes I become quieter because I want to hear the rest of the sentence. And at that stage, I didn't have a case against this man. I wasn't trying to build one. I simply had questions and I was taking mental notes. But here is the thing. Outside of those conversations, he was incredibly easy to like. He was warm, funny, jovial. He was charming, accomplished, well-spoken. He could talk about God. He could talk about family, he could talk about commitment, he could talk about marriage, he could sound incredibly sincere. And that is precisely why discernment can be difficult, because human beings rarely arrive as one thing. Somebody can make you laugh and still say something that troubles you. Somebody can appear spiritually grounded and still hold ideas you find deeply unsettling. Someone can be accomplished and still make you question their motives. Somebody can be incredibly pleasant to be around, and your spirit can still refuse to settle. So we became friends, good friends actually. And shortly after his examinations, he returned to the country where he lived. But the relationship didn't end. If anything, right, it intensified. We began speaking over the phone, video calls, regular calls, long conversations. And because of the significant time difference between our countries, our waking hours overlapped in an unusual way. When he was winding down, I was working. When I was awake, he wanted to talk. And then he wanted to talk some more and some more. And gradually, the warmth became a lot. The compliments became constant. And these weren't ordinary compliments. They were disproportionate, over the top. The kind of compliments where you're just there thinking, okay, calm down, please. Just calm down. You don't even know me that well. I knew I was being gassed up. Like, gassed up. I could feel it. But again, I said nothing. I observed. And then the calls became almost relentless. There was hardly any breathing room. If I was awake, it felt as though he wanted to access me. Conversation, attention, presence, hours and hours. Anyway, thank God for headphones, because I could continue doing other things while we spoke. But after those conversations, I would sometimes feel exhausted. And looking back, one thing I find interesting about the level of intensity is how little room it leaves you to process. Conversation, compliment, call, another call, emotion, another conversation, another compliment, another call. Everything keeps moving. There is very little silence, and silence is where you think. Silence is where you replay what somebody said 3 hours ago and suddenly realize, wait a minute. Silence is where your body catches up with the conversation. Silence is where discernment sometimes gets loud, and I wasn't getting much silence. Today, people would readily describe that kind of overwhelming early intensity as love bombing. At the time, I simply knew it was becoming suffocating, and something inside me was beginning to resist. Not dramatically, right? Not yet. Just enough for me to notice. And here is what makes the beginning of the story so interesting to me now. Nothing catastrophic had happened. He hadn't screamed at me. He hadn't threatened me. There had been no enormous dramatic event I could take to someone and say, look, here is the proof. This man is bad for me. Instead, I had fragments. The repeated conversations about schmecks. The idea that schmexual satisfaction could make a woman remain even in a bad relationship. The stories about women supposedly being unable to let go of him. The intensity, the excessive compliments, the constant access to my time, and a feeling, just a feeling. But I didn't yet understand what that feeling was trying to tell me. And then the conversations began changing. The questions became different. He started asking about my work, my position, my benefits, my pension, my capacity. Marriage started entering the conversations with increasing urgency. Money entered the conversation. My home entered the conversation. And then he made a comment about divorced women with children that stopped me internally, because I was a divorced woman with children. And suddenly, some of the things I had been quietly recording in my mind started sitting beside each other. Not enough yet for me to make an accusation, but enough for me to begin asking myself, what exactly is this man assessing? That's where I'm going to stop, because in part 1B, I am going to tell you about the questions, the money, the trip he suddenly needed to take after I told him I wanted to see him, why I refused to finance it, why he wanted to stay in my home, why I said absolutely no, the strange hypothetical question he asked me about sending money to someone abroad, and the conversation about his father that made me realize that this man appeared to have one standard for the kind of woman his father should avoid, while actively pursuing a woman who fit that exact description, me. And remember, at this point, I still hadn't accused him of anything. I was still listening, still observing, still trying to understand, because the warning hadn't become a conclusion yet, but it was getting louder. And eventually, it would become so loud that one evening, while this man was talking to me about marriage, I started crying. I couldn't explain why. I couldn't prove anything, but it felt as though my spirit had gone somewhere my physical life had not yet gone, and I had come back with a warning. Do not marry this man. But we're not there yet. That's coming. Because before I could understand the warning, I needed to see more. Stick with me.